Good to see you, my friend. Good to get you back on Real Vision.
First time you haven't been in a bar in a long time.
I know. I'm over in Grand Cayman at my house over here. It's sad without the rum behind me. Listen, I wanted to catch up with you because there's so much going on. I don't even know how to get my head around it. And the good thing about you and I, we're both macro. We think of things in that kind of top layer of what's going on. So I don't even know where to start, but let's just start with the main, Bitcoin and Ethereum. What's your view on this right now, where we are, how this is developing?
10 days ago, I don't know, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had two small developments, which weren't small, and one big development that I think symbolically put together was a monster deal. And what were they? Within a week, both Walmart, largest retailer in the world, and Amazon, largest online retailer in the world, put up help wanted signs. Help wanted. We need some crypto people fast. Right? Think about that. The two biggest players in the world said, we give up. We need to be part of the party. We see the future changing in payments, in digital art, in how brands are created, right? Yet that, the same time, Congress tried to sneak in regulation, through the infrastructure bill. That was the White House, Janet Yellen, Gary Gensler, wanting to say, hey, we're a little worried about where this is going. We want to be in control. And they had no idea that the crypto community would roar like they roared.
It was amazing.
Connected people in our world, the Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey tweeting, guys like me on phone calls with senators. And there are lots of us, let alone the 60 million American crypto owners who started, blanketing their phone machines with angry bills. And so they said, wait, but there is a constituency, a really loud one, that we need to pay attention to. And so I put those things together, even though they're not connected. And it was like the coming of age moment. There's the industry's been de-risked. It's an industry. It's going to be an industry for a long time. We are going to rebuild part of the financial architecture, if not all of the financial architecture, but at least part of it on a blockchain-based system, right? IP, creativity is going to be on a blockchain system. The real promise of this whole movement was that if the internet made information free, blockchain is going to allow information that shouldn't be free not to be free. And so it's the internet of value in lots of ways. That's a huge transformation. And I think the world just woke up. And so, you see what's happening in prices of NFTs, of DeFi, of level one protocols, of all of this stuff. It's almost, I tweeted today to Jim Cramer, it's almost like we hit the point of no return in the virality of this.
Yeah, because I've been looking at, because I try and step back because you struggle otherwise because there's so much noise. I step back and look at the growth of the number of users of crypto, digital asset space. It's growing at 113% a year. It's twice the speed of the internet. It's the fastest growth of any technology in all humanity. And as you said, we've hit a tipping point in the last few weeks.
I learned, I shouldn't say a hard lesson because you can't get mad that you don't catch everything. And one of the things I've been just attacked online for recently was Cardano, right? I months ago said I don't understand why it's the third, highest market cap. I couldn't find developers in the communities that I talked to that were using it. It seemed like a ghost chain, but I was surprised by how fervent and angry their community was. I didn't get death threats, which I've gotten in the past, but I got all kinds of just, mockery, mean tweets. And then recently I did another tweet. That was a mistake. And, 500 comments instantly. And what I realized is, and Cardano, listen, it was $140, now it's 270. And so I'd have been smarter to go long. Luckily I didn't go short. I just didn't participate. What I realized was, while Bitcoin as a store of value has this big story and a big community and its institutional buy-in, I really think is going to be here forever. There are these other communities that we might not know the people who are participating in them, but it's a huge world out there with 7.5 billion people, mostly connected to the internet. And somehow Cardano has a community that sees it as some hybrid between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Gonna be the next Ethereum. Right now, doesn't do anything. And so I got no idea if it'll succeed. I don't buy it because I don't see NFTs being built on it, DeFi being built on it. But nothing needs to be built on Bitcoin for Bitcoin to work, right? It's a store of value. And so we have this spectrum of store of value to utility. And is being a store of value a utility? And who am I to be the judge of what people care about? Enough people care about Cardano that it's worth, $100 billion.
And look, we're seeing this with Doge. I mean, I spotted this a while ago. It's like, it's got this vibrant community, but no use case. So Mark Cuban holds his hand up and says, fine, you can buy Dallas Mavs stuff. And then Elon's saying, well, I might use this for something because it's got the massive user base. So if you bring a massive user base and you start building applications on it, then you've got a network. And this is fascinating because, we're not used to seeing things this way round.
Yeah, no. And so we'll see. The Cardano thing, I haven't given it, nor do I think I will buy it given my, having missed this huge run and my bias against wanting to be part of communities that I think have long-term utility. But it'll be interesting to see if they can pull something off. I said it feels like a cult. Well, all of this stuff, investing is becoming this. It's like British soccer teams. They put gates between Chelsea and Man U so they don't go to war.
That's right.
I don't think it's healthy, but it's interesting.
Yeah, but I do think I've been talking a lot about this. The power of community overall in the whole space is what is going to drive crypto because we're going to see adoption within communities of different types of things. And that's what the NFT space is now. It's like Bored Apes versus...
Look at the art blocks community, right? I mean, there was one of my guys, Richard, tweeted twice about, people donating back to other community members, pieces of art that were worth, $500,000. Hey, just giving it back to the artist because he's done so much good stuff for our community. I mean, it's a really sweet community. But you talk about people then wanting to buy into that community. It's the most vibrant community in NFTs, I think.
So how do you deal with just the layer ones? Let's talk about stuff like Solana and stuff. Looks like it's doing really well. You've seen Cardano. You said you kind of missed that. How do you deal with, okay, what are the ones you're going to focus on?
So listen, I have a big team, both from venture, early stage venture guys that we get in on, to trading team that will market making some of these things, my own network of people. And so I still have the belief that Ethereum has such a huge lead that it is going to be core infrastructure. And so we have a big Ethereum position. I have made probably more money this year on Luna than almost anything else. I bought Luna really early. I was wildly impressed with the CEO. Not that he's allowed to be a CEO, but the founder. DAO, with DAO. Yeah. And I've just watched that community grow, mostly because it was a real use case originally with the payment app, right? With the Chai payment system, you're using it in Korea to do things. It was, in some ways, the first guppy that jumped out of the swamp and became a frog. And he's done an amazing job building that community. So for me, it's been who's driving those communities, and you can't catch them all. We've got Polkadot, we've got some Cosmos, but in one way, those bets get very correlated, and so you can look at A versus B and who's breaking out and kind of trade the crosses. It's like trading when there's a dollar bull market, you can still trade euro yen.
Yeah.
And I'm not smart enough, but I don't think anyone is, to know in 10 years what that level one fabric that we build on top of is going to look like. Is Thorchain going to connect them? I just, I'm not a good enough computer science guy. What I do think a lot about is decentralization versus not. And other than Ethereum, all the other faster, sexier, newer chains are a lot less decentralized. At one point, I had this term BINOs, blockchain in name only. And so there's two questions in that. Will consumers care? So far, the answer is no. But we haven't used it for lots of stuff yet. Maybe more importantly, will regulators care? And, if you look at the early Gary Gensler stuff, he cares. There's two reasons that you care about decentralization. One, on the securities, that's the technicality. But do we want so much value being transferred on something that CZ can say, wait a minute. Now, CZ's got a vested interest in Binance Smart Chain not to fuck it up. But there's a lot of power in a chain that's a federated blockchain where it's not nearly as decentralized as Ethereum. And so we're early enough that people aren't paying attention to this yet. But I think as more and more real players are building real stuff on blockchains and governments are saying, hey, if this is where the payment rails are going, I want to make sure I understand who can fuck with it, right? You can't fuck with Bitcoin, or it's very difficult to. I should watch my language. And you can't, with Ethereum, some of these other chains, much tighter controlled, groups of validators.
I mean,
and again, I'm not the expert on this.
No, and I get that. I'm actually interested in what you're talking about, that the regulators might care, because I don't think the public cares. And I know Bitcoin people watching this will hate me for that. Bitcoin is its pristineness, and we can use it for that. And other things have relatively less decentralization, so they're more centralized. And I think that's okay. But do you think the regulators are going to care? I mean, they're so far behind still. I mean, I don't know how they're going to catch up with this. How are they going to catch up with DeFi, centralization, NFTs? I mean, they're still struggling with the bloody ETF. I mean, I don't know how they're going to do this.
What's interesting is the people that work in the shops are much more up to speed than the guys running them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I was talking to a couple of the senators' offices, and their staffs got it. The senators didn't. I thought Ted Cruz was brilliant. He was like, how dare you guys? And I hate Ted Cruz. Damn.
So let's exercise a brief, shining moment of common sense. And let's recognize, if we've gathered all 100 senators in this chamber and asked them to stand up and articulate 2 sentences defining what in the hell a cryptocurrency is, that you would not get greater than 5 who could answer that question. Given that reality, the barest exercise of prudence would say we shouldn't regulate something we don't yet understand.
In that moment, he shined when he said, how dare we try to regulate something that less than 4 of 100 of us even understand what it is. I do think some of the staffs are getting it. Same thing at the SEC, at FinCEN, at CFTC, lots of these places. And so I'm hoping we're going to get deregulation. Gary Gensler gets it. Again, he's political. He wants power, right? He's very ambitious, but he understands how the system works. And you could have those conversations with him. But you're right. It's going to be really fascinating. I think for crypto to fulfill its mission, we need institutions to play. And for institutions to play, we need some regulatory framework, right? Pure libertarians are going to hate me.
But we have to move away from 1934 securities law, whenever it was from.
I think where it's more interesting is the one thing that people can agree on is we don't want to have a system that you can use for terrorist financing or ransomware or kiddie porn, right? So it's hard to argue for, give me my right for kiddie porn, give me my, shut the hell up, right? And so can you at least recognize a government's desire to have a KYC AML policy that gives them some assurance that the system you build to transfer value isn't being used for illicit things? Even though the arguments that we use legacy finance for illicit things. We use dollars for illicit things. No one disagrees with those arguments. Doesn't mean we need to go with the new system. So I think the moment you make that jump to say, okay, we're going to give up some of our liberty to be in society, right? There's going to be some, then you got to figure out how do you optimize making that as small as possible to meet your objective of feeling safe. And I think that's the trick right now. And so you can be a complete nihilist revolutionary, blow the system up and like rebuild it. You know, the amount of pain and suffering, breakdown in civil society that we would go through isn't worth it. You know, anyone cheering for that, I'd like to punch them in the jaw. And I'm a guy who's full of love, you know. And so there is this narrow gap that we've got to figure out how to do as best we can. Listen, right now, total crypto wealth is like 30 basis points of total wealth. Why I'm so bullish on all of crypto is we're literally at the 1 yard line of a 100-yard dash, right? We're just starting. As I just said, with Walmart and Amazon, the checkered flag just went off. Until then, these were all the warm-up laps at a racetrack, right? And now we've run the checkered flag. The checkered flag starts at the beginning of the race and at the end of the race. In 20 years, when me and you are old with gray beards, actually our seat got a little gray, maybe that second flag goes off and we can say, we were part of this great crypto revolution, this decentralized revolution. And so I think working with governments as best you can is essential. I know I'm going to get hammered for saying.
I agree. But you know, people will call us statists, and that's okay. You know, I think you and I've seen the game at a broader level, and you understand how to bring the most participants in is actually by playing. You can change the whole game, but you have to play by some of their rules, and that's okay. How do they choose with all of these people filing for the ETF? How do they say, Novo, it's you, or Hunter Horsley, it's you, or Jan van Eck, it's you? I mean, how the hell are they going to choose?
I've been brushing my teeth twice, getting on the big smile already. Listen, the reality is I don't know. You know, I'm not. I think they're going to look for people with credibility, people with infrastructure. But my guess is, and this is just a guess, I don't really understand the process as well, is that they will approve a bunch at once.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so then it's going to be a marketing game, like who can have distribution where people want to buy in and believe.
Yeah, makes total sense. I want to move on to DeFi, because DeFi was the hot thing. It's calmed down a bit. What's your view of the DeFi landscape right now and where it's going and how it's developing?
Yeah, listen, I think the institutionalization piece, this solving KYC AML, is closer than people think, right? We have a process that we're using that we think is really awesome, that we've got kind of tacit approval on, which is using on-chain compliance. There are Ave's got a project which is really kind of a walled garden approach. Spring Labs is working on something. And so there's a lot of smart people working on how can we get the regulators comfortable that if I know I'm trading with someone, I don't know who he is, but I know he's okay, right? I just keep using the blue check mark. That's the best solution of some sort we're going to get. And I think when you get that, you're going to see more and more people pour in. Banks are debating, fight them or join them. I literally was at one of the biggest banks in the world, and they had their top 50 guys, and they brought a bunch of us in to talk to them because they were making that decision, fight them or join them. And I think they will all come back to join them because, listen, it doesn't mean the purpose of investment banks goes away, right? And finance in general, the financial services industry has been about giving advice to people that don't want to spend all their time on markets. Doctors, lawyers, artists, engineers, business builders. They don't necessarily care about charts or GAN fans or, breakouts. They want their money managed by somebody. And so there still will be a huge industry of people giving advice. The RIA community is not going away. I think they're wildly important in crypto growing. But we might not trade, derivatives through Goldman Sachs. We might trade it through a derivative DeFi platform. We certainly might bypass the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange or any of these exchanges, the CME, and trade on something that looks like sushi or Uniswap. And I think once that KYC riddle gets solved, you're going to see that explode.
And I think
because who else? You can't. There's no one else to regulate. The other thing I'd say about DeFi, then I'll shut up, is why I'm so optimistic is because the more I look into it, it works. It's better, right? It's better for a couple reasons. Atomic settlement, right? So you don't have settlement risk. We saw the settlement risk with the Robinhood fiasco when they didn't have enough, regulatory capital to handle all the GameStop orders. And the GameStoppers thought Robinhood was a nefarious player. They weren't. They just didn't have enough regulatory capital, right? So you've got the atomic settlement piece, which is great. You've got composability. You can build on top of. I always use this example. I got my iPhone. They put GPS on it, and then you got Uber. Without the iPhone and GPS, you have no Uber. You have no DoorDash. You have, Chris Dixon wrote the best tweet storm in the last week, that Ethereum and these other level ones are really the iPhone store, and you can build on top of it. And so that cycle of innovation happens so fast, right? You build something on Compound, which is better than Compound or a derivative of Compound, and everyone's happy. It's all open source. The transparency piece, though, is the big one. We would not have had the financial crises, mortgage crises, if it was all online. Guys like me would have looked and, had some smart guy do a bot to say, hey, tell me who's got the most leverage. And, we didn't know what was in Merrill Lynch's books, especially after they bought this guy and that guy and this guy. Bank of America buying Household. No one had any concept and any transparency into the size of JP Morgan's derivative book, or if it's on chain, we know exactly what it is. We know exactly how many transactions and at what fees they operate on. And so regulators haven't understood yet, because they've been scared, how transformative for them putting everything on chain would be, right? You'll have regulating bots. Regulators will literally be their own protocols. It will win because it's better. And that's my thesis of the big bet.
Yeah, and I think that the investment banks, as you say, most likely will join it. I don't know what that means. The money center banks are kind of screwed. The average one, the one in the middle of Ohio, I don't see what role they play, especially after the Fed coin CBDC comes out. And it's like, there's no point having those. One of the things that's interesting to me is the institutions aren't fully aware of this yet, but there's a world of yield out there that they're all desperate for. And it feels like it's mispriced versus current yield.
The first place they want to do is either lend directly or lend to someone who will lend directly, right? So I think the first place you'll see a bank participate in DeFi, big bank ABC, will take some of their balance sheet and lend it on DeFi platforms. That'll be step one. Or they'll lend it to me to lend it on DeFi platforms.
The yields versus the traditional world are wildly different. Now, it may be a function of not enough capital in the space, but it may not be. We don't know yet.
It is. Supply demand. And you'll see that come down quick, I think. But, things take a long time to move. And so, listen, there's no magic in the world. You don't get money for nothing, right? So you don't lend someone money at 18% without risk. What are the risks in DeFi? Some of these platforms haven't really been punched at hard enough and twisted and tweaked and turned, and so you get hacked, right? Some of the new ones that are up for 3 days, like, oh, it's great, and then, oops, someone hacked it. Now, sometimes the hackers are such nice guys, they give the money back, which is one of the most awesome and kind of wild things I've seen in the space. But in time, right, you always get paid to take some risk. Right now, you're getting paid a lot because you're the first guy in, right? And I think that's a pretty good reason to be in it. We've told every part of our firm, from asset management to banking to trading to lending, to figure out how to build on chain. What can we do now? What are we doing now that we can put on chain in the next 18 months? Because I just see, you can't be a crypto company, at least not thinking about that. How do you have on-chain asset management? How do you have on-chain, credit business? And we've invested a ton in as many new protocols as we can, where we, think they have a chance to win. Things like 1inch, right? Which, and you'll see all of these things have a similar life. You got to build them, then you got to get them used, and then they either gain traction or they don't. But
I know one of the things I think is really interesting that people are only getting their heads around is staking. It kind of feels in Ethereum that this is risk-free rate, which is a fascinating concept, right? Because you're not having to deal with DeFi. You've got no risk because it's on chain and it's staked, and you're getting decent yields. It's like, okay, this is a bit of a game changer.
I think the whole system is coming of age in a really quick, faster than any of us expected in some ways. I was out with Joe Lubin, who, in some ways, of anyone I've met in the system, when I first met with him and he kind of gave me the whole big 10-year, 15-year, 20-year vision, he's had the firmest roadmap. And even if you sat with Joe, he'd be like, whoa, happened faster than we thought, mostly because of COVID. COVID was like this giant adrenaline shot in the ass of the crypto elephant, and it got the elephants running. It feels to me, like I said, we hit the tipping point.
Yeah. So the other tipping point, there's two other things I want to pick your brains on as well, because it's moving too fast for me, is NFTs and DAOs. How are you even navigating all of this? I get it. You've got a team and everything else. So I'm not talking about Galaxy here. I'm talking about you personally, because it's just a crazy amount.
I had this great honor or terrible job, depending on how you look at it, to do the keynote at Christie's on their NFT conference. And, it was a great event and everyone liked it. And I felt like I understood a month later, I'm like, what the hell happened in that month? It's moved that fast. And I was telling you before we got on, what's frustrating to me is just the architecture I've used my whole life to understand markets, which is always a story and a chart, right? And I want to see, if it was currencies, I had 10 economic and political stories and 10 charts. And then I could do the chart versus the chart. I could do the euro versus the yen, the dollar as the base case. We're not there yet at having built that architecture to look at, ringers versus punks, or versus VFriends, or versus one-off messy NFTs. And so even the architecture, for me, I'm sure some young kid's already built it for himself, but it's not readily available to look at value and what's moving in charts and market cap. We're working on building it, but I don't have it. And so it's phone calls, it's intuition.
And it's hard to even figure out what is value, between without a chart, what's the difference between a Bored Ape and a CryptoPunk and a VFriends, and how should you value them? What's fair value? What's expensive? I have no idea.
So I actually think we're in a frenzy right now, and I don't know if this frenzy will end well. It'll go longer. When I think of things like ringers or generative art, I do think you're going to see traditional art collectors say, that's interesting. One of my friends, actually was Tom Sachs, who said, oh my God, when you look at generative art, it is literally the extension of Sol LeWitt, who started algorithmic art, way back in the 50s, 60s. And so there's a narrative that real artists, traditional artists are looking at. Things like CryptoPunks are collectibles, right? They're culture. When Jay-Z bought a CryptoPunk and made it his Twitter, I actually said on stage, we all should buy a CryptoPunk. Of course, I never went around and got it done for myself. There are only 10,000 of them. And so it's an amazingly cool collectible, right? Art collectible. I think there'll be different communities, right? Put it on my shirt, walk down the street with it. I tell you what, pretty soon we're going to have these freaking AR glasses. If I had a cool CryptoPunk, I'd wear it like jewelry. Yeah. Right now, as close as you can make it your Twitter profile pic. And I think those will be different categories in the long run. And so, but who knows? I'm right, but I do think you'll have art for the same reasons we've had art. You'll have collectibles. Listen, our group at Candy is coming up with really, really cool shit to when it comes to the sports memorabilia. So like kind of a stay tuned, but I'm seeing, what the future looks like for that, and it's cool shit.
I mean, also what was cool today was that Visa announcing that they bought a CryptoPunk.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that.
I did. So when I first got into Bitcoin, not 2013, I sat there with Dan Moorhead from Terra, and we were trying to think of like the ramifications of Bitcoin. And at one point we were like, man, maybe we should short Visa and MasterCard. Would have been one of the worst trades in human history, right? That bank conversation I said when it was, should we engage in DeFi or fight it? Visa saw the future and said, this is where payment rails are going. And so we better be part of it, right? So Visa's made a huge pivot, into understanding what role they'll play in this new ecosystem. And MasterCard's right behind. And so I think the takeaway from that meeting 4 years ago and 2 years ago and watching what they've done, meeting their team, is the smartest companies are starting to say, originally they said there was a probability of it happening, right? A possibility of it happening. Now it's happening. And so you're going to see more and more Visas, Walmarts, Amazons pivot to being part of this ecosystem. And that's really exciting for us all.
I mean, it's incredible, right? It's incredible that it's happening. We kind of thought it might have happened in another 3 or 4 years, 5 years, but it's happening now. The other thing I'm trying to get my head around is DAOs, which is, it's just growing exponentially now. People are setting up DAOs. I can't even get my head around how you collectively manage organizations.
I'm going to tell you that some organizations are going to be better managed through a DAO and some aren't, right? Like centralized planning worked really, really well for Jeff Bezos. He built this amazing delivery machine, and he did it in a centralized fashion. Other businesses work better decentralized. And so I would say DAO is not going to replace the corporation completely. It was really interesting. The very first DAO I was looking at really carefully, and then I got hacked. And I remember talking to Alex Tapscott about it. He wrote a book. He was a Canadian guy. Him and his son wrote a book on this stuff. And the new company would have no employees, right? You'd work outside the company. And I was thinking about it from a venture perspective, because that's the original DAO that got hacked with Ethereum was going to basically be a venture fund that the members of the DAO would decide what projects to pick. So think about this. Is a DAO venture fund going to be better than the benchmark venture fund? We should run that experiment. I would think that Peter Fenton and his partners at Benchmark have had this weird intuition, this special sauce, this network of connections that have given them the edge, that their funds have just destroyed everyone else's, right? They are just have been the best venture investors in the world for a long period of time. I don't think that's not because of some unique special sauce. And I would probably bet on them versus a DAO venture fund. I could be wrong, and we're going to see the experiment.
We actually tested this out, Real Vision. There's two guys who are the Munich Re Quants team. They formed a business called Two Quants, and with this Real Vision bot thing, you see it on Twitter. They've been surveying the crowd for a crypto and a macro portfolio. They've outperformed Bitcoin. They've outperformed almost everybody, and it's kind of random because some days like Cardano's in there at like the top coin, and next week it's not in there. So it's not like you and I would run a portfolio, but it's done really well.
And if you talk to the guys at eToro, right, their follow the trader business has done very well. We'll see, right? I'll still give my money to Stan Druckenmiller before I give it to a DAO when it comes to macro investing.
Yeah, exactly right. So the final thing I want to catch up with you is, hats off to you. You saw this. You formed Galaxy a cycle too early. You said, well, I thought the institutions were going to come, and they didn't come that cycle. And then they've come in waves, and you've scaled fast. How many people have you got now?
Well, once we close the BitGo transaction, we'll be well over 400. And if we look at just our hiring pipeline, by January 1st, we'll be over 500. So it's a lot.
And what have you built out? You've built out all of the parts of investment banking, essentially, haven't you? Nobody else has done this, as far as I can see.
We have got an investment banking team that's growing. We've got an asset management team that's growing really fast. A prime brokerage business that's being put together as we speak, right? That was a combo, will be a BitGo Galaxy, and a normal sales and trading business, electronic trading, voice trading, a big derivative book, a mining business, which both is investing in mining ourselves, but then doing mining finance, mining derivatives. The coolest business from your perspective and my perspective is our direct investment business, right? So we have over 50 investments, well over 50 investments, kind of split between the metaverse. Sam Engelbart and Richard Kim run a team that has been all over the metaverse for 3-4 years, and call it protocol DeFi stuff, Michael Jordan and John Cole. And so that's, of course, been the most dynamic business, right? You put a little bit of money in some of these projects and you make a lot of money.
Are you doing that for the balance sheet as well as for customers?
So most of it's been for the balance sheet. The metaverse stuff, we have a fund and we're just closing a second fund. And the other stuff has all been balance sheet. So my idea is, if I invest in a DeFi protocol, first of all, I'm begging them to get in if they're top tier founders, and I'm competing against, Paradigm and Polychain and A16 and all these guys who bring a lot to the table, right? Go to Paradigm, they bring you the engineers, they almost build your protocol for you, And so what are we at? We've got great venture guys that are going to help those young businesses grow, but we can say, hey, now with BitGo, we got wallets. We got custody. So we'll build a wallet for your protocol. That's one of the biggest things to get people to then use it. BitGo's wallets are used by so many exchanges. So if BitGo builds a wallet for you, it's almost on, by definition, 2/3 of the exchanges. We've got a market making business. Hey, we can market making your token, right? We can lend to your token from the staking side. And so I want to be that flywheel that helps these new protocols get jump started. And we'll be able to participate, make money, maybe lose money, but make money, hopefully, all along the way. And so when we're talking to young founders or older founders, that's our reason to take our capital. Because it's not, there's no shortage of capital, right? There's shortage of projects that are going to actually revolutionize things. And those guys, those engineers, those founders, they've got their pick, right? They got 19 people knocking on their door, begging to put money in. And so when I put it all together, right, the thesis in some ways is we want to use our own money, balance sheet money, to learn about the space, to really try to stay on the edge. And then we want to transmit that to all our customers, our asset management customers, our banking customers, our sales and trading customers, our mining customers, and say, hey, these are the lessons we're learning. This is how we think we can take you along on the journey. We're still missing some holes, right? We're not in the retail space. We're indirectly in it, but not directly in it. That was I think a missing piece of DNA in my head when I started this whole thing, because that's been where the space is. But it's certainly something I think about a lot.
Yeah. And what about regulation for you? What happens if they try and regulate you like an investment bank, and your reg cap changes and what you can do? Do you get a sense of that space playing out?
We are, because we didn't start, we started as a company that instantly went public in the Toronto Venture Exchange, Toronto stock market. Because I came from Fortress and Goldman beforehand, we've always operated like a regulated entity in lots of ways, and we're regulated by lots of people, right? We're our asset management asset management piece gets regulated, our broker dealer gets regulated, and so as much as I'm out there fighting for good regulation, most of this stuff doesn't directly impact us. It indirectly impacts us. We are investing in that arm. Like, I was embarrassed. I was like, I know so many of these guys. Why haven't I been up there talking to them a lot, educating them? And so we're starting that process, trying to put together a team to really help in this molding. Because I think there's 18 months, 24 months where DC is going to kind of learn it and set the rules. And so I think there's an essential for all of these organizations. You know, as I ran into Brian Armstrong in France, of all places, I was on the phone and he was on the phone, you know, both trying to guide that Senate compromise the way we wanted it to. And I think, you know, he went down to DC, took a trip, and I think you're going to see more and more people that have a vested interest trying to help the people who are making the rules understand what they're doing. And listen, it's hard enough for me and you to keep up. If you're a senator, you're starting with what's a Bitcoin, not what, not the nuance of the different ways we can do central bank issued digital currencies, which is an amazingly important, conversation. If right now in the US, our biggest foreign policy fear is China, right? Make no bones about it. We are going into a Cold War with China. Every single Democrat and Republican is hawkish and on their guard about China. It's embarrassing that these guys don't have at least bachelor degrees, let alone masters in, central bank issued digital currencies. Like, we can't talk about China and not know they have a central bank issued digital currency, which is completely centralized. Well, should we have one? Well, yes, we should. Should we have one run by the Fed? Absolutely not. We should have one run by places like Circle and lots of competitors. I thought David Marcus put a great piece up last week. Everybody should read that thing on his view of the central bank issued digital currencies. And he makes a play on why Facebook should be allowed to have one. That's un-American to tell one person they can't just because they're big and strong. But it's certainly worth reading. I'm not advocating one way or the other, though I actually think it would be good for Facebook. So I guess I am advocating, because instantly you'd have a dollar stable coin, even if they use someone else's stable coin, right? That's my hunch with no inside info, that in the long run, the Novi wallet will be more important than the, what do they call it? The DM coin, right? The Novi wallet to connect their 2 billion people to using a dollar-based commerce token.
The moment they do that, they win a lot, right? It's the biggest network on earth, privately owned network.
That's my, again, with having not spoken to him, just my hunch on where things will go, because it makes too much sense to me. And I always think, okay, what's the Occam's razor answer? Things that make sense happen. Again, I don't know if there's Facebook has a trust deficit with the government, at least. And, it's funny, people say they have a trust deficit with consumers, but they certainly don't seem to when you look at their earnings and adoption, right? But they certainly do with the government. And so we'll see how that plays out. But I really feel strongly that the US and other Western countries shouldn't have it run by the central bank. They should have it regulated where those deposits go. And I saw today that Circle said, we're going to go right back to treasury bills and cash, from moving out the yield curve and trying to run again, if you're a regulator and you're like, I don't want Circle being a non-bank bank. They want to be a bank, let them be a bank. I don't want to be a non-bank. I'm all right with that. They can have a central bank issued currency and they can run it like a trust bank. Hard to make money. There's no NIM, but there's other ways I'm sure that they're gonna get service fees.
Yeah, but I think it's fascinating. And I think it's the right conversation, because this big move, what the ECB decide, what the Fed decide, is going to define the entire space. And it's not happening this year or next year, but in 3 or 4 years, we'll know, and it will change everything. So, final question, what are you most excited about right now? What's the thing that you get kind of, whether you think it's just cool or you think it's a great opportunity, the one single thing that you'll speak to your friend about, you'll pick up the phone and go, have you been watching this? It's amazing. So
this is going to sound like a cheesy answer. I have always had a hard time trying to figure out. Hold on one second.
I had that a minute ago as well.
When I started thinking about this way back, it was always confusing. You know, the internet, crypto, what's its role? The really simple way to think about it is this gives us the ability to put value where we want value. Where the internet took all information, made it free. Now we're going to say, you know what? My music code isn't free. My art code isn't free. My whatever isn't free. And you know, you're going to bring value back to people that had it taken away from them in lots of ways. And so it's easiest to see in the NFT space. I'm an artist. Here's my IP. Every time you trade, I'll get a dividend. You know, like that story is easy. But I think it's going to go so much beyond that. And so it's a rethinking, quite frankly, of who's contributing in society. You're going to see this huge shift from businessmen to creators, because creators have this way to monetize their creativity. And it's not just artistic creativity, it's all kinds of creativity. And so I'm most interested, again, if I had to start a business from scratch, just intellectually, it would probably fit in the NFT space because that's the simplest transmission mechanism. But I think you're going to see social tokens explode. You're going to see fan affinity tokens explode. You know, hell, we can have a real vision token.
I'm working on it already.
You know, if I own enough tokens, I can have lunch with you. And if I have that many tokens, maybe even get a date with you.
You're not my type. You're a handsome man, but you know. Yeah, look, I'm the same as you. I just think it's fascinating how this is going to play out, this whole value system. And look, as ever, just fantastic to pick your brains. I love the fact that we can talk about the whole space in that kind of macro perspective because it frames it for everybody. Look, I really appreciate your time as ever, and good to see you.
Awesome. Be well.